Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Could Europeans have made it to Central North America over 1,000 years ago? What is the MacIntosh Stone? What do its strange carvings mean?
Hello and welcome to the 810th broadcast of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno here on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM. These rocky questions came from my co-host and partner in the paranormal and dad, Paul. And today we welcome a new guest on a new subject, and we welcome your calls today. The number is 401-766-1240. That is from anywhere. Or you can email Paul at behindtheparanormal.com or contact us via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
Coming to us via Skype today is Michigan-based travel writer, speaker, researcher, and storyteller Ron Rademacher, author of the Michigan Backroads series of books. Ron's interest in his home state extends to its remote past, and that's the subject of our discussion today.
So, Ron Rademacher, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Hey, good afternoon. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Oh, well, it's great to have you with us here. So, let's kind of start off with something that is sort of seemingly simple, but not quite so simple. So what is the MacIntosh Stone, and how and when, where was it found?
Well, the MacIntosh Stone is a rather small object that was found on the tip of the Keweenaw Peninsula. When I say small, excuse me, it's only about twice the size of a dime. And it was discovered in the 1980s by a guy by the name of Charlie MacIntosh. He was out on the Keweenaw Peninsula picking agates, as people do.
Yeah, as people
brought
do.
it home, and he brought home a bag of them, didn't pay any attention. And when he began to clean the agates so he could polish them, he discovered one of them is covered, both sides, with very intricate, tiny little engravings.
Can I ask one thing, Ron? You got a bunch of New Englanders here. What is that peninsula again, and where is it exactly in Michigan?
Excellent question. The Keweenaw Peninsula, and our famous place there is Copper Harbor. Most people have heard of that. The Michigan has two peninsulas. The Upper Peninsula is on Lake Superior, and the Keweenaw Peninsula extends far out into that lake, and just north of that is Isle Royal. So Copper Harbor is a very famous town up there, and the very tip of that peninsula is where this stone was found.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right.
Interesting. So, what did people think the MacIntosh Stone was initially? Were there any sort of speculations, theories, whatnot?
There were some speculations. I first ran across it in a booklet called Coming for Copper, which is published by the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society. They had no information about the stone at all, but the fact that it had been found in Michigan and it was said to still exist fascinated me. So the carvings are very enigmatic, and as I began to research it, I've had people tell me that because there's what appears to be a spider on one side and a crescent moon on the other, that it could have been Hopewell, which would be around 600, 800 A.D., Native American possibly, but because the carvings are separated into little frames, they resemble cartouches like you would have in Egyptian. So some people suggested that this was Mediterranean, possibly even Phoenician.
Okay, before we go any further, let me suggest that, of course, we're on radio for most people. Just want to suggest that through Ron's courtesy, Ron sent a bunch of photos of this object and some relevant illustrations to go with it. And if you go to behindtheparanormal.com, our show website, go to the show archives for 2019. There are talking points for this show. Just hit that, and you'll be able to see the illustration. I know it's a little complicated, but that's radio, I'm afraid. But again, the archives link on behindtheparanormal.com, the 2019 shows, and this one's right at the top, and there's a link to the talking points for this show. So I'm sorry, Ron.
No, that's and I'll just throw in there, if that doesn't work out, just go to MichiganBackroads.com,
sure.
And on the home page, click on the Paul Eno Images link, and it will take you to a page where I have a short slideshow running of 8 images that we'll be talking about.
No, they're not images of me, I'll assure everyone. Okay, so
neither me.
All right. Well, let's before we continue. I have a lot of questions of my own. Actually, I'm going to give you one of my own questions before we go to listener questions. What method was used, do you think, to carve such images, which are actually rather clear, on such a small stone? I mean, how would that have been done, do you think?
Well, this is one of the great mysteries, because as we got into this and I had high-resolution images taken of this, we've discovered there are actually images of men carved on this, and they appear to be in a position of celebration or, almost like they're praying. And when you see the stone next to the dime, you realize that we have no clue what was used to carve this. And we have it aged from a number of people as putting this stone at between 200 BC and 300 AD for an actual age. That may be, may not be. Other people put it at 1000 AD. But nobody has yet come up with any idea of what tool could have been used to carve this, because the carvings are very intricate and the stone is very small.
Because you know what I might be getting at here, regardless of one's opinion of the show Ancient Aliens. I don't know if you have a love-hate relationship with that show. There is constant speculation about sophisticated tools and techniques being used to carve various stones that they run into. I mean, personally, why anybody would come a zillion light years to start working with rocks, I don't know. But some speculation may arise in that direction, or maybe has. Has anybody suggested this is not of this earth? I mean,
I haven't had anybody suggest that, but the subject does come up because, like some of the other objects that have been found around the world, the carvings on this are so fine, and the workmanship is pretty doggone good. Once you know what to look for and you can see what you're looking at, the workmanship on this is fantastic. So the subject has come up.
Okay, I'm sorry. Ben managed to get the pictures up on the page. Very good, Ben. Okay, I'm sorry.
Way to go, Ben. Way to go, Ben.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, he's indispensable. I'm sorry, Ron, go ahead.
No, we always do talk about because Ancient Aliens, regardless of your opinion of some of the things they do bring up questions and they do expose us to objects that we never would have heard of any other way. So, no one has spoken about that, but there's a lot of speculation that this particular stone does have to do with ancient mariners making it to North America, as far back as 1000 AD or earlier, and even being connected to the copper culture, which, there's a lot of evidence that people were coming here from Europe to mine copper in the Lake Superior area, because that has the purest copper on Earth.
I never knew that.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah, in fact, I'll just give you an idea quickly. I'll give you an idea, because this does connect. There on the Keweenaw Peninsula and on Isle Royale, there are more than 5,000 prehistoric copper pit mines, and we know how old they are because there was copper in these mines sitting on wood when they were rediscovered, and some of that wood has been carbon dated to 1200 BC. And we have a pretty good idea that as much as 500,000 tons of copper was removed from these mines, and it's nowhere in the North American archaeological record. This copper just simply disappeared. Now, the reason that people would come here for that copper is because it's 99% pure. In other words, you don't have to smelt it. All you have to do is get it and begin hammering away at it, to begin working it, and you can create armor, you can create swords. And so the idea is that people came here to get this copper over a 2,000-year period, and this copper actually fueled the Bronze Age in Europe.
Interesting. You can see, it seems hard to believe at first glance that people would get all the way in there, inland to do that. However, when you look at the chain of lakes, as you yourself pointed out in our conversation a month or so ago, Ron, all you have to do is hop lakes, really, to pretty much get in there.
Yeah, okay. Literally all you have to do. And if you look at maps of what the lakes looked like 3,000 years ago, the waterways were much more open. The water was considerably higher, and so it would be a very simple matter, really, to land at Nova Scotia, make your way by land across Canada, and from there, Isle Royale from the Canadian coast was only about 30 miles at that time.
Now the question
So you could
arises-
easily do that. You could easily sail across that.
Sure. Well, the question is, how would they find out that it was there in the first place?
I was actually just going to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's fine. No, great minds think alike, I suppose. No, I guess that kind of begs the question. You know, it's just someone just wandering around, and then they happen to find the purest copper ever found ever, and then they just decided. You know, what do you believe is the sequence of events that kind of led to this?
The best that I've been able to find out is it was based on trade. This copper was prized by Native Americans. In fact, they knew all about this copper, and the Ontonagon boulder was shown to European visitors by Native Americans who had known about it for generations. And so, what I think happened is the Native Americans were fashioning jewelry and ornaments and bowls and things of that nature out of this great copper, which was not available anywhere else in North America. And they traded it from tribe to tribe, and before very long it had made its way, and it has been found all across the United States and all across North America. And my speculation is that one of these visiting groups, either Vikings or Phoenicians or whoever it happened to be, traded for some of this, and when they took it back, everyone was astonished and said, well, where'd you get it? And so they said, well, we got it from these guys over, on the Big Island, and they say that you can just pick it up off the ground. It's just laying there, which was true. It's called float copper. It had been deposited on the surface of the earth by the receding glaciers, and you could literally. There's a piece of it that was just found, believe it or not, recently in 1970 in Lake Superior, and it's now on display in Houghton, Michigan, at the Mineral Museum. There's a piece of copper they've mounted there that weighs 38,000 pounds, and it's pure.
My goodness, that is, and I don't see anything in what you said that isn't completely plausible. And certainly it's probably not even a secret anymore. I mean, there was apparently global trade from a very early period, if not prehistoric. Apparently. So
well, I think the weird thing is that most historians don't. Well. So there's outliers in pretty much every group and mavericks, I suppose, if that's not a great word for it, but you know what I mean, that are kind of like, global trade was a thing. There's a whole bunch of stuff about our ancestors and, people who lived here before us that, they knew things. They weren't dumb. But there's this very like modern notion that kind of appeared probably around the time of Darwin that we're really smart. Our ancestors were real dumb, we have cars and iPhones, and, our ancestors were idiots. They didn't know how to travel around the world. And I think that's still kind of relatively prevalent in most mainstream archaeology. So I guess I was going to ask this the next hour, but since we kind of moved into the subject, or the next half hour, I should say, we moved into the subject by osmosis. How have you been approached by historians or archaeologists or anybody and by your work or your discoveries or anything, and how have they reacted?
I have been. In fact, I'm making a presentation in October at the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society convention based on the discoveries on this stone. Because before we finish, I should tell you about what the new speculation is about what this object actually is.
Oh, sure.
But I have been, and I get two responses, because there's one school of thought that is based on when we first started creating the United States, and that was eminent domain, and we created a whole ideology that said that it was our right to take this entire continent, and that was, and this is, some people don't like this statement, but that was based on establishing that all the indigenous peoples here were just savages, and they'd had no culture, and so it was perfectly all right to just wipe them out. That's bluntly put, and it's it's not entirely true, but that's one side. On the other side, and so because anything that went against that school of thought was suppressed. So there was no the culture and the art and the religion and all of that was was suppressed. And then of course, if it was pre-Columbus, they call it pre-Columbian, it couldn't have had anything to do with North America, but the Vikings had gotten here. We all know that. That's been proven. And a lot of people said, well, how could people from Africa or ancient Scotland or Denmark have gotten all the way across here? But there are two ways to get here that are remarkably simple. In fact, a guy recently did it in a bathtub.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. If you look at a map of the Atlantic Ocean, from the bulge of Africa to Brazil, that distance is shorter than the distance from the eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea to the western end of the Mediterranean Sea.
I never realized that.
It's not and there's a river there. There's a stream, there's a current in the ocean that goes from that bulge of Africa and drops you at Brazil. And then if you work your way north, there's another river, the Gulf Stream. And then there's the other stream that goes across the northern part that takes you back over. So if you know a little bit about guiding yourself by the stars and sailing, which obviously they did because they were sailing on the Mediterranean Sea. Everybody knows this. I mean, this is not a big... And the Mediterranean Sea is much more dangerous than the southern Atlantic because the storms are fantastic. Yeah. If you know a little bit about the stars and a little bit about the fact that the water is moving under you, it would be relatively simple to do. And so to make believe that no one ever got here, it's the Azores and then the Canaries and then on over to Cuba or across the top, going from England to Ireland or up to Iceland, Greenland, Svalbard, these are just little short hops.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So it's perfectly, the technology was perfectly available, and I even have I don't know if we'll have a chance to get into it, but I worked out a theory about how canoes were used to move the copper from where the mines were to the coasts so that seagoing vessels never had to make it to the Great Lakes. That was always been one of the problems, is no seagoing vessels have ever been found sunk in the Great Lakes. Well, they never had to get here because you could move the copper. Just to give you an idea, a cube of copper, this pure that is a 12 inches on a side, a foot cube, weighs 580 pounds. So 4 of those is a ton. Fairly easy to move a whole bunch of it. And what they did is they hammered it into shapes that were called ox hides that were easy to carry on your shoulder, and they get them down to about 100 pounds apiece, and they could be stacked. They've actually been found in ships sunk in the Mediterranean where they were being used for ballast.
Wow. Well, let's...
so the evidence is all over the place on that, and we can connect all this to the MacIntosh Stone. It's a little bit of a stretch, but it's not as much of a stretch as people might think.
Seemingly so. Let's go to some listener questions, Ron. This is we have, believe it or not, a large listenership in Mexico and South America, and we have a very faithful listener, Peter from Bogota, Colombia, who sent in a few questions here. Please ask Ron, please ask Ben to read the question.
Sure. That's the first part of the question.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah.
First question, can Ben read the question? Alrighty, So Peter writes, the first question. So Barbara DeLong suggested you take the stone to you took the stone to a psychic and got a psychometry reading. Did you investigate that?
Yes, that was a suggestion, and in fact, that is going to happen at the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society. There are going to be a couple of people there who can do that. So that's the first weekend in October is when I'll be there making this presentation, and we're going to try and have those readings done.
Okay. So before we move on to the next question, that's basically like reading the stone in a way, like trying to determine. Explain the process. What is psychometry?
Well, I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on that subject, but my understanding is that these people who are sensitive mediums in that area can read this stone, and they can pick up information about when it was carved, what was going on, where it's actually from, which would be, that's the one thing we do not know, is where this actually came from. So I always compare it to people who are able to use crystals to get information, that kind of thing.
Well, we actually, I had a little bit of experience with that a number of years ago. You weren't even a glint in my eye at the time, Ben. We had a woman who was very good at doing psychometry, and she would hold a stone in her hands and be able, and different psychometrists, if you will do it in different ways. But in her case, she could tell about all the people who were associated with it, where, pretty much where it had been found, because there had been some carvings on it, and seemed to be nothing too exciting, but came from an area where Native Americans would make projectile points, otherwise known as arrowheads, and they would used this for carving, so there wasn't anything wildly fascinating about it. But it was interesting that she could do that. So if that's legitimate, that's pretty much how that works. So.
Yeah, and I don't see any reason to suggest that it's not legitimate. I mean, there's a lot of things that we don't know. In fact, I'm sitting in I think I let you know, I'm sitting in an inn that's haunted right now. So and there's a group here also called Upper Paranormal who are supposed to look at this stone from a psychometric point of view for me before I go to this conference in October. So that is definitely an area that we're pursuing, because I know that there are people who can pick up a great deal of information by holding these objects and by doing these readings.
Yeah, and we'd love to find out how that goes, Ron.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's plan to do that. Sure.
Great. We'll be in touch on that. Okay. So we have another question. Yeah.
Yes. So the next question that Peter writes is: have you done any lab tests on the stone?
We've only done minimal lab tests. Here's the thing, and that's a really good question. Here's the thing with this stone. For many years, I've taken it to people, I've shown it to people, and it was so complicated, and there was so little information about what these carvings were, because they're very difficult to interpret, that no one wanted to really take the time with it. I mean, it's not sexy. It's not a Viking sword, and it's not the Templars, and it's not Oak Island, but the new discoveries that I have made, when they see these, and no one's even seen the new discoveries I'm going to present in October, I'll be glad to tell you guys about them. When they see this, it's going to completely change people's attitude about this object, because now they're going to see, wait a minute, there's real information on this. Now we need to take this a little more seriously and find out what we've got here. So I'm pretty sure that in about 3 weeks here, we're going to have a whole different attitude toward this object.
Ooh, cool. So, next question from Peter, which is actually a pretty interesting one. Has the owner of the stone, or you, experienced anything mysterious since having contact with it?
I myself have not, other than constant frustration on how hard it has been to find out anything about it.
I suppose that's pretty mysterious.
Usually when you have an object like this that's got this kind of carving on it, and I've sent pictures of this around the world. I've had conversations with people on 3 continents, and everybody just, they give me 1 or 2 opinions, usually Native American, and it goes no further. So it's been extremely difficult to get any information, which is, that's been my main thing, is frustration. Charlie, everybody who works at this inn that I'm in, and that's where the MacIntosh Stone is, by the way. I can give you guys the number later if you want to talk to the owner, or if you want to come here and see it. It still exists. It's here. You can just walk in and they'll show it to you. Bring a magnifying glass.
Okay.
No one has said anything that the things that happen in this inn are directly connected to this stone, because the things that have been happening here have been happening for over 150 years.
That's fair. Okay.
Excellent question. Excellent question.
Oh yeah. No, Peter's usually on point.
We should make him an honorary.
I like this guy. I like this guy. Yeah.
We should make him an honorary guest co-host.
Pretty much. He basically is. Yeah. So his final question is: in your book, Oddities and Rarities, what other unexplained anomalies do you discuss?
Oh, that's really good. There's a couple of different things. And a point about the Oddities and Rarities book. When I write about oddities and rarities or paranormal things, one of the criteria that it has to meet is I have to be able to see it with my own eyes. All right? I don't write about, there's a ghost light in a lighthouse somewhere. I don't do that. I go and find things like this stone, which I heard about, and then I track them down. So some of the other things that I talk about in that book, there are some pyramids on the Ontonagon River that have never been explained. We've got that. We've got the glowing tombstones in Everett, Michigan. And again, now this is a graveyard where from time to time people report that the gravestones are glowing. Well, usually the very first thing I do when I hear something about something like that is I go to try to see it myself. I've been there 2 or 3 times, have not seen it. I did get stuck in a ditch there and had to ask the graveyard guard to help me get out of the ditch.
That's fair.
And that was hilarious. But but the point about that anomaly is that those graveyard stones have been reported to be glowing since 1824. which is way before we had cars on the road, way before we had mercury lights. It's not one of these reflection things.
Okay.
So there's that. I also talk about the Sanilac petroglyphs, which is a giant set of carvings in sandstone in the thumb of Michigan, and this is about half an acre. It's the only verified petroglyphs in Michigan, although we have found some others. There are, in an upcoming edition of this book, there are 3 huge stone circles in the forest in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. When I say huge, I mean 100 feet across. And there are 3 of them right in a row. It's not like Stonehenge. These are almost like a circular wall, and they're quite deep. The part that's enclosed is quite deep. You stand down in them. I'm 6 feet tall, and I can't see over the top. And people who live 20 miles away have never heard of it. I happened to have found out about it many years ago. Finally was able to get someone to guide me in there and track it down. Then there are some other objects in small museums around Michigan. All the stuff is real. All of it can be gone and be seen, and usually you can go and pick it up. There's a tool in Ontonagon that is said to be a tool that was used by Vikings to repair their ships. There's some controversy about that, but it does exist, and there's one just like it in Oslo, Norway. So,
okay, we're going to take our bottom of the hour break now.
Lots of cool stuff in the book.
Indeed. So you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. And we're having a fascinating conversation today with Ron Rademacher from Michigan on the MacIntosh Stone and more. So stick with us.
Did you know that in the 1960s, 92% of Americans listened to local radio every week? What do you think it is now?
I bet it's a lot less.
Would you believe that it's still 92%?
Wait, you mean more people listen to radio than TV?
Yes, more people use local radio every week than any other device.
I know I listen. I just didn't realize that everyone else does too.
92% of Americans listen every week. You are right now. Thanks.
You can depend on us for public service. ON Radio.
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
Okay, we're back Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno and our very fascinating guest today, Ron Rademacher. And we're talking about the MacIntosh Stone and a number of other things about Michigan that are really fascinating, and possible incursions into the area or visitations for commercial reasons by Europeans and who knows who else, way, way, way back. All right, so Ron, let's kind of go back to the foundation of our questions here. Where do you begin when you search for the history of stones like this? I mean, what's the process?
Well, the process is really, the very first thing I recommend, because people want to go and do these things, like I'll tell you about the burnt bluffs and the prehistoric painting on those bluffs. Usually when I hear about something, I start doing research on it online. Sometimes that doesn't work. You have to go to the town, find the historical society, find somebody who can remember. And I recommend drinking heavily during all of this, because it's very frustrating and oftentimes you can't find anyone. Now this particular stone, in fact, I'll tell you how the breakthroughs happened on this. I took this stone to the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society, they were the ones who had first alerted me to it, and I took it around to everybody who would take a look at it through their little magnifiers that jewelers use. No one could come up with anything. Then I came back to the NEMA Inn, and we were sitting around. I was talking to Charlie, and I was showing him the pictures I'd taken of it, and some people who were in the inn said, well, can we look too? And a lady said, well, can you flip that picture over right there? And I said, well, yeah, I can flip it over, and which I did. And she said, well, that's a man right there. And so we flipped the stone over, and sure enough, there is an image. If you're looking at the pictures online, the picture you want to look at is force is men, and it says center. And if you look at that picture, you can very clearly see there's a man's hairline, and he's looking to the right, and he's got something in his hands, and he's got a shield. And from that, we discovered that what had always been interpreted as a spider was actually another man sitting with his hands in the air, And that was just a coincidence that just one person happened to be looking at it who was an amateur, and when that happened, then I went and had high-resolution images taken of this object so we could clearly see what the images are. Another coincidence that took place was that a book called Bronze Age America by Barry Fell.
Oh, I knew Barry Fell, yeah.
You knew Barry Fell. Well,
yeah.
I was looking through his book, and on one of the pages that I have one of the pictures I have up there is called Fell, and it shows a double-hulled ship, and below that a symbol. One looks like a figure eight, one just looks like a circle, and that's called a buckla or a buckler, and it's got some symbols around it. Well, that symbolism combined is interpreted as being thrust upon the waters as for a voyage. Now, if you look at the MacIntosh Stone that's labeled 6 buckla, and it says boat and buckla, on the left-hand side is below, at the bottom of the left-hand side, we thought that was a crescent moon, but when you flip it over like this, it's a double-hulled boat. And above it is a double image that used to be considered maybe a bird head, but now people are saying it looks just like the buckla. And so when you combine that with the 3 men on the other side, now the interpretation that I'm going to take to AAPS is that what we actually have here is a commemorative stone that was marking a great voyage that was going to take place.
That is very interesting because I was going to lead into that. We have I was going to ask other stones around the world that might be comparable to this, and I'm thinking of the one in Rhode Island, which is very little known here in Rhode Island, and it's in the eastern part of the state, and one of the upper arms of Narragansett Bay, and it's beneath the slopes of so-called Mount Hope, which is actually just a hill. I mean, the highest point in Rhode Island is only 820 feet above sea level, but it was well-known historically as a place where during King Philip's War, some of the natives took refuge and this sort of thing, and had dwellings. But below, on the beach, are a bunch of boulders, and I can honestly say, I don't know if Ben knows this, but Ben's older brother, Jonathan, made 3 major archaeological discoveries before the age of 4 years old, because we're running around the state looking for these things we'd heard about, and a lot of them had been affected by a hurricane of 1938, weather, this sort of thing, which actually did move boulders. So this particular carving reminds me of the stone we've been discussing. There is a hulled vessel. It's generally interpreted to have been Viking, because there seems to be some evidence the Vikings visited here at the same period they were visiting Newfoundland, and so it's the similarities were kind of striking, and it's carved on a boulder, but it's very small, and it has been studied by archaeologists, things of this kind, and it is agreed that it is it is from that period, and I mean somebody just didn't carve it recently. So that struck me as rather similar to the ship on the stone in Michigan.
And I'll give you 2 more that will tie this together. I have another picture that's running on the slideshow, and you guys probably have it there. It's called the Westford 4.
Yes.
And this is a line drawing of the Westford Knight in Westford, Massachusetts, and it's a carving on a stone there, and it's been very controversial, and people look at his sword, and people look at his head, trying to figure out if it's real or anything. When I saw it, and I didn't know anything about it because I don't pay attention to anything outside of Michigan, but I happened to be trapped in a snowstorm and was watching the History Channel, and this image came up, and if you look at his shield, there's a double-hull ship on his shield, and above it is a buckla, is the figure 8 circle with the line through it. It's almost identical to what's on the stone and what's on Barry Fell's book. So we have 3 different objects from 3 different locations, from 3 different time periods, all with the similar symbolism on them, all having to do with a voyage across the Atlantic. I mean, if this is all a coincidence, it's a fantastically astronomical coincidence.
No, it's very true. The commemorative explanation makes a great deal of sense.
Well, I'm going to give you one more. I'll give you one more. just so, because people are going to want it. This is if you take a look at the picture that is labeled Men 3. Now, it's in gray, and the reason it's gray is because this is
get that back on the screen, Ben, please? Yeah. There we go.
Men 3, so it's turned gray. Well, that's a result of the high-resolution photography process. The stone is actually brown. But what we have here in the center is the guy I showed the close-up of. That's the man there. He's kneeling, and the middle part of that is his shield. If you look to the right, we used to think that was a spider, but now we can see that there's a man with his forearms raised, and his legs are down. He's in a sitting position, almost in supplication or in blessing. And you can't see it very well, but the extreme left cartouche is actually another human being kneeling behind the center figure. Now, none of these images appears to be Native American or Mediterranean. They look very much European. And so, with this and the other side being the buckler and the ship, I think what this object was carved to commemorate a voyage, but I think also that it's a passport. I think that this was granted by a monarch or whoever the powers would be who sponsored this voyage. And when you're going to do a voyage across the ocean, you're going to be gone for a couple of years, so you need supplies, you need this, you need that. And since people were illiterate, they could be, the leader of the expedition could be supplied with an object like this. And when he took it to a merchant, that merchant knew that if he supplied the supplies the man needed, he would be paid by the crown. So that's just,
okay.
This has been done. These kinds of things were used as passports or as letters of credit. And then that would explain why, because we still don't know, but it would explain how it made its way all the way across and was found on the Keweenaw Peninsula, because it would have gone with the voyagers.
So it was like dropping one's wallet.
It's like dropping one's wallet.
Right.
Exactly. Or in this day and age, you dropped your iPhone. All your apps are laying there on the Keweenaw Peninsula.
What a disaster that is! Yeah.
So, is there any idea as to what time period this could have come from?
Yeah, I mean, and anything more sort of because if it's targeted than what we've mentioned.
Yeah, if it was European writing with images, especially, it doesn't look medieval. It looks like pre-Dark Ages almost.
Almost, and there's a couple of things about this. Well, if you've ever watched the movie called Barry Lyndon, it was by Stanley Kubrick. It was about an Irish guy who got in all kinds of trouble, and it shows him going to an inn and a number of different places he goes to, and the signs outside of these businesses that tell you what the business is have no writing on them. They're just symbols. So people were illiterate. So symbolism was really, really important. But one of the anomalies about this stone is, if you look at the pictures, you'll see there's a kind of a white line running around the edge. And that white vein, you can just see it on a couple of them, that white vein for sacred objects was a very, very important feature. So if someone was creating an object that was going to be a sacred amulet or a charm or a blessing stone, they would look for a stone to carve it on that had this white vein going through it, and that is universal. That's I've talked with people from who are experts from South America, people who are experts on North America, people who are experts on the Middle East, Mediterranean. They all agree that when you have this white vein going through an object like this, it was most certainly involved with religious symbolism in some way. Of course, if it's European, then the church would have had something to do with blessing it. But again, no one really knows. Of course, this hasn't had very good research done.
Let's go back to where this was found, Ron, by Mr. MacIntosh. As you know, the location of an object when it's found can have profound implications for, I suppose, where it came from and its origin. Was this found? Can you give us a picture of the area where this was found? Was it found apparently lying right on top of the ground? What was it? Had it been in a water course? Had it been moved, do you think, by water? Is it an area where people frequent the vicinities, as in a trail or hunters or things of that kind? Natives might have done that. Was it a projectile point manufacturing place, or what were the what was the context of the actual location?
This is an absolutely brilliant question. I got to compliment you. This is a great question.
Well, thank you very much.
This is brilliant because
tell your mother that Ron said that, will you, Ben?
Yeah, Ben. Make sure you write that down.
Okay.
Yeah. Something you'll hear every day. Is that what you're trying to tell me? Is that you'll hear that every day? If you get a map of Michigan and you look at the Upper Peninsula, you'll see the Keweenaw Peninsula sticks way out into Lake Superior, and above it is Isle Royale, and above that is Canada. Now, where this object was found was the tippy point of that peninsula, and to get there today is extremely difficult. You have to go to Copper Harbor, and then you've got to get an ORV, four-wheel drive thing, and you've got 30 miles of just treacherous, mountainous cliffs and old trails to get through to get to where this object was found. And the reason that Charlie was out there is because Charlie does that. He's a man who goes and marks timber for the timber companies. And so when he's waiting for them to catch up with him, he goes and walks along the shore looking for things like this. And so the very, very in fact, this spot is so remote that this is where Michigan at one time had a rocket program, and that's where the launching pad
really?
The launch pad is still there. Yeah, you can Google up Michigan Keweenaw launch pad, and there's pictures of the pad is still there. And so this was found on the very tip, and it was found about 50 feet above the existing water line. Now, if you looked at it, you can see that it's very heavily worn. So the question about was it in a waterway, well, it was probably has been wave beaten, and the fact that it wasn't worn completely smooth is amazing. Now, why would someone drop it there? How could that have happened? Well, here's how it could happen. This is the place where you would stop if you were on a voyage. If you were making a voyage from the Sioux Locks and the St. Lawrence Seaway to the Keweenaw Peninsula or Isle Royale, you would stop in this spot because it's the most convenient place to stop. There's fresh water nearby. There would be game nearby. There's timber there. You would stop there. If you went to further west and went down the outside of that peninsula, you could reach the Ontonagon River. If you go up the Ontonagon River a few miles, in 2 portages, you could be on the Mississippi River. If you went the other way, toward Whitefish Bay, it's over by Munising, which is where the pictured rocks are now. That's one of the famous places people go here, the pictured rocks. At the time that this stone would have been dropped, there was actually a waterway that went through the Upper Peninsula all the way to Lake Michigan. Very navigable. It was formed by a glacial burst as the glaciers were receding. Well documented that it was there. You could have taken anything through there, or you could have come. So you could come down the St. Lawrence Seaway into Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, into Lake Huron, come up to Lake Michigan, go along the southern edge of Lake Superior, and go up that waterway, or the northern edge of Lake Michigan, go up that waterway, and be in Lake Superior, where this copper was, without ever getting off the water.
Wow!
So this would have been a place where you would have stopped and staged, because if you were going to Isle Royale, from where this was found, it's now 50 miles to Isle Royale, and so this is a place where you would have paused on your voyage if you needed to get timber for your supplies, if you needed to get fish, whatever the case, if you had to do ship repairs. This is a place that's very likely that you would have stopped, and some little kid was playing with his dad's sacred amulet passport. He was skipping stones and dropped it, and they couldn't find it. So I know that kid got tanned.
Very plausible.
So that's the location of it and how it could have gotten there.
Okay.
It wasn't picked up by no one was there randomly. If whoever was there was going somewhere with a purpose, because it's one of the most remote places, and it's a place that's only accessible, by the way, gentlemen, by water, about 90 days of the year.
Wow.
Because winter, is 6 months, 7 months long in that location, and spring and autumn. I mean, the saying is, get your boat off the water in October.
All right.
So, and don't put it in until June. So there's only about a 90-day period where someone would have been doing this. So it's not a place you would have just gone just for the fun of it.
So here's a quick question for you, or maybe it's not quick. If there was a traveler infrastructure, right? So there probably would have been maybe small ports along the way, because it seems like this would have been a large operation to kind of go back and forth, having a mining facility and whatnot. Is there any sort of evidence of buildings left behind, any sort of structures, anything like that?
A couple of things. There were no permanent structures on Isle Royale, which has always been a puzzle, but I've solved that one for people, because you wouldn't have had to build anything there, since you're only going to be out there for about 60 days anyway. You just take your teepee with you and bring it off when you take it off. But there are, for instance, Calumet and Houghton is halfway down the Keweenaw Peninsula, and when that harbor was being created by Europeans, there was a pit discovered in that harbor that contained 20,000 tons of copper. Someone had moved it there, and it was there for transshipment, and this copper trade that was taking place suddenly stopped about 1200 BC. People just put the tools down and never came back. There was a piece of copper in one of these pit mines sitting on a cradle of oak that was being raised up out, and the operation was never completed. And from that cradle of oak, that's what they carbon dated to determine when it had been put in there. And that was, 2000 BC when that was going on. So the one of the puzzles has always been, well, where did the copper go? But how did they get it out of there? Where are all the dwellings? Where are the shipwrecks? If you had big ocean-going ships in Lake Superior sinks ships all the time. And so where are the shipwrecks? Well, they're in Watersmeet, there's a casino. It's a place called Lac Vau Desert, and there's a canoe on display in that casino that was found in Watersmeet in 1950. Very briefly, this canoe is 32 and a half feet long, 3.5 feet wide. It's 22 inches deep, and its sides are 1.5 inches thick. So I sent the dimensions of this thing to a buddy of mine who's an engineer, and I said, can you do the displacement math for me on this? I have the math. If anybody wants to see it, we're going to publish it later in October. And I don't really understand it. Archimedes, splashing around in the bathtub, and it's that's displacement. And I wanted to know how much cargo could this canoe carry with 4 or 6 paddlers in it and their equipment. And he came back and he said it could carry 2 tons. So the next thing was, if I put an outrigger on it, could I paddle it from the Keweenaw Peninsula to Isle Royale? And he said easily. You'd have about a 10-hour day. So if you take those 4 cubes of copper I described earlier, you could put 4 of those in this canoe, and you'd have a ton of copper, which you could move from Isle Royale to the Keweenaw Peninsula, and then, or just take it over to Canada and drop it off there, or take it down to the Ontonagon River and portage to the Mississippi River and down to Poverty Point, where there were smelting spots, where they were smelting copper. And if you had 100 of these canoes, and they only made the trip twice each summer, that would be 200 tons of copper that would be moved every summer. And that's just 2 trips per canoe with only 100. So why wouldn't you have 400? So you could take these down in stages out of here, get them down to Lake Huron, get them down to up the St. Lawrence Seaway, and the ships coming over from Europe would only have to stop there and could unload the copper there. So you would never have to have a huge city built here. You would never have to have ocean-going vessels get into the Great Lakes, because you could do it all. And they have today in Canada, they have a big race called Rabaska, and it is cargo canoes that are only 26 feet long, and these crews are 9 people, and they race these things on the river. So we actually have one of these canoes that's prehistoric, that's verified that it's prehistoric. So this whole thing could have been done, and then when winter's coming, you would just load up your teepee, drop your tools, because they were stone tools, leave them there, come home, spend the winter with the family, and then you would go back and do your 90 days of labor in the short summer out there in Lake Superior. That's one way it could easily have been done without having the necessity of a lot of Europeans tramping around in this part. And again, they wouldn't have to do it. You could easily do it by just taking everything over to Canada and taking it right across to Nova Scotia and transshipping it across from there.
Very likely.
That makes
well,
sense.
Ron, we're almost out of time here.
Oh no, I'm having too much fun.
I know, so are we. But take a moment to tell people again where they can find out more about you, your books, your website, and where they can find out more about the stone, or where they can even see it.
Yeah, thank you. MichiganBackroads.com. Go there, and if you want to get information about the stone, just click on the oddities section, or click on I have a map of Michigan on every page. Just click on the Upper Peninsula, and you can just look for NAMA or MacIntosh Stone. If you want to come and see the stone, NAMA is a small town near Escanaba. You can call and let them know, hey, I want to stay in this haunted place. We do have rooms here. And you can come, and if you let us know you're coming, we'll make sure that the stone is available for you to look at. Charlie keeps it here wrapped up in a nice sock so it doesn't get damaged. Yeah, in fact, I think he uses double socks on it.
Well, that's fair. Yeah.
Very good.
And if you go to MichiganBackroads.com and you want to contact me, it says contact Ron. My contact information is there. My email's there. I answer all of my emails. I'll be glad to send people pictures, whatever information they want about this. And if you want to get my books, there's special prices on the books. Just click on books, and it'll take you right to the shopping cart.
Outstanding. Well, thank you very much, Ron. A fascinating show, and we'll be in touch off the air.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good talking to everybody. And that guy, Peter, is that his name? Thank you for the great questions.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, let's get to our announcements. My book, Dancing Past the Graveyard, Poltergeists, Parasites, Parallel Worlds, and God, is now in stores. It's available at all our fall events. The official release will take place with our good friends at the Toadstool Bookshop in Keene, New Hampshire, next Saturday, September 21st, beginning at 2 p.m. It's a beautiful drive up there, and it's a great store, so if you can come up, come up. Or down, or wherever you happen to be.
In whichever way, shape, or form. So many thanks to Deb Horan and the Book Lovers Gourmet Bookshop in Webster, Mass., where my dad had a great time yesterday at the first real book event for Dancing Past the Graveyard. It was a great group of people and a lovely venue.
This Thursday, September 19th, I'll be at the Cumberland Public Library. Ben is welcome to make cameos in any of these things, too. The Cumberland Public Library, 1464 Diamond Hill Road, Cumberland, Rhode Island, for a presentation and book signing for Dancing Past the Graveyard. I guess that's the second pre-event, starting at 6:30 p.m. Call 401-333-2552 for more information, or visit the library website. As mentioned, this coming Saturday, September 22nd, the official release will take place again at the Toadstool Bookshop, and the information there is it's going to be at 2 p.m. You can call 603-352-8815 for more information.
There are lots of other events after that, but especially the Greater New England UFO Conference that's slated for Columbus Day weekend. That's October 4th and 5th at the City Hall in Leominster, Massachusetts. Along with ourselves, speakers will include Calvin Parker, eyewitness to the Pascagoula UFO incident in 1973, Roxy Zwicker, William J. Hall, Jimmy Pentanito, Alexander Petikoff, Dave McCullough, Ronnie LeBlanc, Cheryl Costa, Mike Stevens, and Dennis Stone. Once again, the Friday section of the event will be Bigfoot Night. So you can get our books, including Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong, Behind the Paranormal 2, Bigfoot, Mothman, Monsters You've Never Heard Of, and now Dancing Past the Graveyard, Poltergeists, Parasites, Parallel Worlds, and God. They're available from online retailers and in some stores, but for autographed copies, please visit the online bookstore at BehindTheParanormal.com once the site is back online.
Okay, well, the site is online, BehindTheParanormal.com. As a matter of fact, the only thing we're having really good luck with is putting the video feeds of these shows online, because they are not resident on our site. They're right here from the radio station, from WON, and it takes you to their site where you can see them. So there's been no problem with those. However, we have been having issues with uploading the actual MP3s of the show audios, and we do suggest that people go to a number, and there are links on our site to this. There are any number of podcast sites. All the major ones carry the recordings of the previous shows. They're back to 2011 at this point, including the CBS shows, and we're going to get them all back to 2008 as soon as we can. So there'll be hundreds and hundreds of shows for you to listen to.
Baby steps.
Yes.
So there are links to several charities we've adopted on the show, including USA Cares, Canadian Veterans Advocacy, Helping Haiti's Orphans, Youth Mentoring Connection in Los Angeles, the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, and the Sisterhood of Ground Zero. And next week we have on September 22nd. We'll bring you an open line show to answer your questions on many paranormal subjects, assisted by our favorite guest co-host, Shane Searway.
And we leave you this afternoon with an incisive thought from American author Ralph Waldo Emerson. Quote, "Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail." Unquote. I like that. Anyway, I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno, and we still have a few seconds before the whatever.
Well, who's your favorite? We always end with a quote: Einstein or Emerson? Who's your favorite?
I mean, I did go to Emerson College, so I'm a little bit biased. But it's not named after that Emerson.
And we're related to Emerson too.
So you might as well go with who we're related with. So anyway, you are.
I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno, and thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey. And we shall see you behind the paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now.